Hello, everybody. I'm seeing a ton of people already pouring in here, which is really, really exciting. My name is Adam Sokol. I head up content and do a lot of brand stuff here at Orum. And if you are looking for our iOS 26 call screening webinar, you are in the right place. I want to let everyone know, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. I've opened up the chat. So if everybody can just type in where they're from, mainly I want to make sure that you all have access to chatting. So the chat is open. Perfect. Awesome. That is an immediate yes on that. The chat is open. Feel free to drop your questions in there. This is only a half hour, so we're going to get to as many of them as we can. And any that we don't get to, we will try to follow up with afterwards. It could be about scripting, tech specifics, platform readiness. We're happy to talk about practical things as we go. But before I dive into that, I'm going to let Bob and Jeremy introduce themselves. Bob's off mute, so I'm going to have you start. Bob, can you kind of introduce yourself and what you do here at Orum?
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, I'm Bob Aspell. I'm the VP of product here at Orum. And yeah, that means my job is to talk to users and lead a team of product managers and designers who work with reps to figure out sort of like how to make Orum better, how to get them into more conversations, and how to help them book more meetings.
Awesome. And Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Gomberg. I lead our enterprise sales team here at Orum, so responsible for our five amazing enterprise sellers. So we work with some of the larger sales teams within the world really, and helping them achieve better outcomes when it comes to outbound pipeline generation. So yeah, excited to chat today, and good to be here with you and Adam and Bob.
Yeah, fantastic. And like I said, okay, we've only got about 30 minutes here. So again, feel free to type in questions. We'll try to get to those. But just to give you guys like a brief breakdown, what we want to provide you, what we want you to walk away with today is Bob gave this breakdown, so full credit to him. More or less what we know, what we're seeing in the Google version of call screening to kind of compare it to what we expect with iOS 26, and then what you'll be able to do with Orem as it evolves. So first things first, we're gonna kind of dive into a technical breakdown. So I'm gonna give the floor over to Bob. What do we know so far about the call screening feature in iOS 26, and how is the beta testing going?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So far, we know what the screening feature is supposed to do. So from what Apple's released and what we've sort of read about online, like if an unknown number calls you, it'll give you a short prompt and it'll allow the caller to leave a quick message kind of stating why they made the call. And then the caller will go on hold, and then the recipient will have a chance to react. And this prompt will show up on their iPhone very much in the same way that a text message would. So you get a notification, you see it, and then you have an option to either connect the call or send them a little short text prompt back like, like I'm busy right now, call you later, or like I don't have time to talk, or I don't want to talk to you, etc. Another thing that we know for sure, because we've played with it in the beta, is that this call screening is a setting. And so, like many other iPhone features, it's really subject to discoverability and like intention. It's not how iPhone works out of the box, or it doesn't appear like it's going to be how iPhone works out of the box when iOS 26 comes out in September. But and in these cases, typically, when we look across other mobile features and we look at, say, like the Google feature, which I'll talk about in a second, um, these settings tend not to get turned on by very many people. And so we're really kind of anxiously waiting to sort of monitor data and see the usage patterns. And I said I know we know how it is supposed to work. To be clear, like iOS 26 doesn't come out until September, and we've gotten our hands on the beta version of iOS 26, but um, what we're seeing online and what our experience has been is that it doesn't quite work consistently yet. We're not actually seeing it sort of actively screen calls it's supposed to screen, and so we're still in that testing phase, and I'm sure Apple is still in that building and testing phase. So we'll monitor it, but right now we're kind of planning based on what's published and what the intended flows are meant to be.
And there's a question in our chat already that's right into the next question that we were going to ask anyway. Someone asked, man, you guys are hot on the questions. This is great. Somebody basically asked, like, Google phones already do this, right? Like, how, so correct, there's a Google version of this. And so I'm curious, Bob, like, what did Apple say iOS will do versus what the Google version that is live right now currently does?
Yeah, totally. And I think some of the bells and whistles of the iOS version will probably come later, or maybe they haven't quite been revealed yet, or maybe they're not apparent in the beta yet. But for now, here's what we know. Like Google has had this feature since 2018, which I think is a really interesting bit of context to think, is the world going to change? It's like actually this stuff has been out there for a while for a lot of users. Um, the Google version has a lot of bells and whistles. So users can screen calls manually, not just robotically. You could like get a call up and send it to the screener. You can also configure the sensitivity of the screening. So, maybe you just say, I just don't want to get calls from known spammers, like those folks that show up as spam likely. Send those to the screener. Or maybe you want to be, extra protective and say, uh, anyone that's not on my contact list, send them to the screener. And so they've had some time to iterate on it. And when we look at the data behind the Google version, so this feature, you can get this feature on non-Pixel devices, but for the most part, it's a very like Google Pixel focused feature. And 14% of the US market for mobile phones is on Pixel. And when we look at the Orum data, like less than 0.01, so 0.01% of the calls in our database actually go to a screening mechanism. Like when we look at transcripts, we don't see that the screener, except in like a very, very, very tiny fraction of our calls. And this would tell us that within Pixel, the adoption of that screening feature is extremely low. And in practice, we're not seeing that these screeners have materially altered the outbound cold calling experience for reps. In fact, like we look at the data for those calls that we've identified as Google screened, and candidly, we haven't built extra special features to handle Google screening yet because of the data. Like we're not building features for 0.001% of dials. But the connect rates and the meeting booked rates on those calls are actually still quite high, like in line with what you would see on any other mobile phone call. So, that tells me that reps are getting through, they're able to have good conversations, they're able to book meetings. And so for now, if you're asking me like, will this like totally upset the apple cart? All signs point to probably not. But I think we can talk a little bit more about like what the future looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to kind of give away the rest of our conversation, but I do think you mentioned the data, and I do want to point out, obviously you said, the current on the Google Pixel side, it's less than 0.01% of calls, but interestingly, like you said, the connect rate is about the same, and the data point that I really love that our data people pulled for us is when people call into the current like the Google call screener, if they do get connected and they get through, they actually have a higher rate of booking a meeting with the prospects that they're calling. And the reason being is like they've kind of gotten through all the muck and mess of like, oh, can I get connected to this person? Are they going to care about it? I mean, it's like once you have once they say like, okay, I want to have this conversation with you, they get through the call screener, you have a better chance of booking a meeting, which was a data point that I found really, really interesting. And I don't want to let that go before we moved on from this. I do want to shift slightly to Jeremy from the sales point of view. When you first saw this release as a sales leader, what was your gut reaction as someone who lives and dies by the phone?
Yeah, I think it's natural to feel some level of concern. I think this may change the way we approach calling somewhat, but I think for me personally, I feel so strongly that cold calling is not dead. And I think this is just another thing that we're gonna have to adapt to, like we did with Stir Shaken or Focus Mode or Live Voicemail. I think people have been saying cold calling's been dead ever since I joined Orm 5 years ago. So I think I've got some tough skin. And I think it's really important not to draw in or get drawn into some of these like blanket statements that we might see on LinkedIn and really look practically at what the impact might be and focus on things that are in our control. So that's really what I'm excited to dig into today further with you guys.
Yeah. So thinking about like diving into, one of the things that you do here is you talk to a ton of other sales leaders and sales teams and customers. What are some of the questions that you've already been hearing from people that our team is working to address?
I think we're getting a lot of questions, which is good, but what I'm encouraged by is the questions are more of like, okay, how can we adapt? How can we get better? It's less feeling dejected or doom and gloom. And so folks are really interested in, what should my sellers say? How should we open up our calls? Should we use like a pre-recorded message, or should we use a vague message, or should we be really specific about why we're calling? And so a lot of it's around, what do we think is going to help us get past the screener the most? We've also gotten questions around, should I parallel dial? Should I power dial? And then I even was talking to one of our enterprise customers yesterday who was thinking about implementing, branded caller ID to take advantage of some of their brand recognition to see if that could help establish more credibility and lead to more conversation. So I think we've got a lot of really interested folks that are just looking to improve and looking to make the adjustments starting now. And I think we're seeing some of the questions in the chat already. So I think we should jump into some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a ton of questions. There's also a Q&A. I see some people using that as well as the chat. A couple that came in, and Bob, Jeremy, I apologize like if I'm putting you guys on the spot. We want to be as open and upfront with everybody in here as possible. It's like there are some questions we will absolutely have answers to, and there's others where our answer will probably be like we're going to find out between now and September and help and learn with our customers. But somebody asked for the 0.01%. Have you noticed any trends across like security, personnel, C levels, etc.? We haven't. It's such a small segment of our calls. I can tell you, Jonathan was the person who asked this question. I'm building out a persona report as we speak right now. So good timing on you asking this question. And a really interesting thing, just anecdotally across all of our personas, is when you look at seniority, whether you're calling into like finance or sales or marketing or engineering, regardless of the persona you're calling into, the C-suite actually answers the phone the most often, almost across the board. So this is just to say, like, if you are calling and you see C-level people in the calling, like, don't shy away from them. Make those phone calls. That has nothing to do with iOS or not. That's just an anecdotal thing that I loved. Um, so yeah, we have a ton. I'm gonna ask one or two of these questions, you guys, and then we'll get back to the ones we had prepped. I had somebody see, I've never been able to get past the Google call screener, even in situations where I've been referred to call them by someone else. Bob, can you kind of explain like how that might work, or if that does that question make sense to you as from like a product standpoint, not being
Yeah,
able
I
to
mean, I
get
would
through
want
it?
to follow up and ask, like, are we dialing in parallel or are we dialing in power? If I were getting a referral, right? Someone where, I want to make a very intentional call. I'd be calling them in power dialing or calling them one off. In which case, you'll get to give that opener. And I think something I'm really excited about, like as we think forward to like, let's say like, we talked a little bit about the Google data, but let's say that iOS creates this tipping point where like call screeners become a really big part of the world. Like you get to give your pitch before the person answers the phone, right? And more than getting to give the pitch before they answer the phone, you get to give your pitch before they just robo send you to voicemail. I think that's the part that could be really killer here. And so I think what will happen is it will become really vital to master this 8-second pitch, right? Like you have one sentence, two sentences to say what you're calling about and what's going to get you through. And I think the thing that really excites me about, the Apple potential tipping point, right? Let's say like this actually becomes 10% of calls over time, is that we'll have so much data to analyze and figure out like, is this working? Is this not? Like, what are like, is it better to, and I saw some really funny suggestions in the chat. Is it better to like be super vague and to like get a curious person to answer? Is it better to be super explicit and intentional and make an amazing pitch in two sentences to get someone interested to answer the phone? We'll have so much more data. And like, I mean, with Orum, we get all of this transcript data that we can analyze, and then we can give those best practices back to our customer. And within customers, we can analyze their data for them and say, these are the screening openers that are getting you through. These are the ones that aren't. And you'll be able to test and like iterate the way that marketers, for example, have been doing with search engine marketing or email subject lines or like social posting forever, right? Like that's a very, I think we all think about marketers as these amazing artists. And I think, Adam, you sparked that for me. But marketing at its core is very, very data backed. And I think having that data of how openers go against screeners will be super powerful.
Yeah, I love that when we were talking offline, like earlier in the week, when you basically said it was like a light bulb for me, where you basically said like, you guys A/B test LinkedIn headlines and email headlines all the time. It's going to be the same thing. So I really love that
Mhm.
notion. I can't let it not go by. I was laughing. Simon, who said, "Should we lie and say this is your mom calling?" And then bam, sales call. Please don't do that. But it did make me giggle a whole lot. That was really good. We will get back to some of your guys' questions. There's a bunch of them in there that I've seen that kind of flow with some of the questions we have prepped. So I want to get back to what we have, make sure we have time for that. I want to shift into a little bit of like seller strategy and messaging. So, Jeremy, we'll start with you on this one. Now that we talked about like the mechanics of it, I want to get into how sellers should actually respond. So, what adjustments would you make to a typical opener, knowing that it could be transcribed and reviewed by the call screener slash AI first?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on your current strategy and how you're going about cold calling today. If you're someone that likes to lead with, maybe a lot of, hey, how are you doing, or rapport building up front, and then get to kind of the reason for the call later on in the cold call, I think you might need to adjust and start front loading, some of the reason for the call earlier on. So I do think my opinion is I do lead more towards reducing uncertainty and not being super vague about why you're calling. And so for me, I would try to pick a reason that draws a connection between myself and the prospect. So that could be, some sort of intent signal, maybe past conversations I've had, referral, marketing events, at the very minimum, just referencing the prior sequence action I've taken to get to this point, customers in their industry. And so it's something that's going to provide quick credibility and draw some sort of common ground between me and the prospect. That's how I would approach my opener, and that's kind of how I approach my cold calls anyway.
Mhm. And then we touched on this a little bit before with Bob referencing like what this might look like in practice, but should we be teaching reps to kind of front load in that like front load value in that first single sentence, maybe even like scripted into onboarding?
I think so. I really think that we've got to get to the point. We've got to reduce enough uncertainty so that we identify ourselves as not a spammer, right? Because the whole purpose of iOS is to shut out the spammers and actually, shut out the unwanted calls. And so we need to identify ourselves as someone that's not part of that bucket. But I also don't think you need to give too much up front. I think there is a little bit of like mystery and piquing their curiosity that we should have in this opener. So I think you just need just enough to establish credibility, but not overdoing it either, and keeping a little bit of mystery in your opener.
Yeah. And this should go without saying, but this is going to in fact impact omni-channel outreach as well. Like we're entering an era where your cold call must be preceded by an email or a social touch. Like how do you think this will affect omni-channel outreach?
I think a couple different ways. I think the best practice I see from some of our top Orem users is to follow up a call after a manual first step email, and they kind of use their email copy as a bit of their opener, a bit of their call script. And so I think we'll see that practice more widely adopted so that you can leverage the work you've done on your email and your research and leverage that as part of your opener to a screener. Um, I also think, this opens up kind of a new channel for sales reps that we never really had, which is text messaging. And this isn't something normally incorporated in B2B outreach. And really what this is like a text message to our customers. And so this opens up a whole new channel. And if we can, maybe they don't answer the call, but if we can point them to a follow-up email or a follow-up social touch, I do think we'll see increased connections, increased conversion rates on those other touches that come after this phone call.
Yeah. Speaking of text, there were some really great questions in the chat here about like the call screener, like kind of if people respond via text, the iOS screener seems to reply via text. How will the rep get that? Bob, I'm gonna let you kind of touch on this a little bit more in depth. And in real time, I'm gonna turn on a light in my room because we have a thunderstorm rolling in and it is pitch black in here all of a sudden. So, Bob, take it away.
No problem. Yeah, I thought that was a really good question. I think Daniel asked it. So right now, Orum is able to actually receive text messages on your behalf. When we look at the data, these text messages that come back are largely junk, like literal spam text messages. And so we don't show them to our users, but we do have that capability. And I think call screening might become sort of like the impetus to start taking those in and showing them to you in an inbox. One clarification, like we don't have any plans to pivot Orum towards like outbound prospectors sending text messages to their customers. Like outbound text messaging has like a whole other sort of market connotation and legal ramification. And so we always talk about and discuss those things, but that's not coming anytime soon. That said, inbound text messages that are response to a screener, we could absolutely be building features that allow you to say, okay, cool, the screener said, hey, can you tell me more about what this is about? And then you could shoot off a message and reply. That could absolutely be part of the solution. And we for sure have that capability.
Mm-hmm. And apologies if you touched on this just briefly as I was stepping away. Somebody asked just a few minutes ago about any plans on letting callers set up pre-recorded screening pitches, similar to what we do with voicemails, but for
Yeah,
when
I,
getting
I
into
think
the
that's
screen.
a great idea. And candidly, like there's my mind is racing with how we could use AI to do that, right? Like, rather, maybe it's pre-recorded, maybe it's like AI generated to match your voice, and maybe you could AI generate 7 to 10 different ones and be A/B/C/D testing them. There's a lot we could do. I think there's one watch out would be, at Orem, we tend not to use like pre-recorded voices in live calls because of various regulations that,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to get your numbers marked spam. We don't want to, run you afoul of the various commissions. But I think we'll have to look at these screeners and see if that like creates an exception case where you can drop a pre-recorded message. And if so, uh, that seems like an obvious way to solve this. And it's one of the ideas that we're definitely testing.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I know we're jumping around a little bit. You guys are asking really wonderful questions. I want to try and get to as many as possible. Somebody asked, if Jeremy, if you can speak a little bit more about branded ID. You were referencing that before. Can you just kind of like talk a little bit about what that actually is and how it is being implemented in Orem? You don't have to touch on it in super in depth, but somebody asked if we could hear a little bit more about branded ID.
Yeah, I think the concept here is showing up as your company name on the caller ID. And so I think what we've seen generally is when I talk to customers about this, I think folks that don't have as much brand recognition, this tends to actually drop connect rates. But it is something that we're experimenting with, especially for some of our larger enterprise customers that do benefit from their brand recognition, and it could potentially increase connect rates. So that's kind of the theory here is that using your brand as a way to establish credibility and help reduce uncertainty and ultimately lead to more connects. So it's something that we're experimenting here at Orem.
Love that. Okay, I want to shift into like Orum's role in all of this, whether we have a ton of people on the call. So whether you're using Orum now or evaluating it or one of our competitors, the platform you're using has a responsibility to help you as much as possible. So first, I want to start with Jeremy, like stepping back. What role should platforms like Orum play in helping sales teams adapt to changes like this? Is it about more data, more training, smarter workflows? Like what are you thinking through from the sales side of things on that side?
Yeah, I think it's all the above. I think Orum should play a big role in helping sellers, meet prospects where they're at and help them segment and organize their list, based on how prospects like to be engaged. For example, we already have in our platform the ability to filter your list by hot numbers, people that are more likely to answer, and cold numbers, people are less likely to answer. And it allows sellers to adjust their speed of calling based on that intent. And so I see this being another play that we can run with the call screeners and allowing, reps to better focus on all of their screener calls at the same time so they can focus on their openers and better prepare for those calls. Um, and then additionally, I think because of the scale that we have at Orum processing almost, over 1.5 million calls a day, we're going to have real-time intelligence to give sellers on what's working, what openers are getting through, what's not working, and they'll be able to adjust really quickly and learn really quickly and be able to adjust on the fly. So I think just the scale that Orum has can help sellers in a big way so that you can learn faster and adjust quicker.
I love that. And then probably the part that everyone's sort of been waiting for with just a few minutes left here. Bob, without giving away any specific roadmaps, roadmap like specifics, because this is being recorded and we're going to send it to everybody. But can you speak as to how Orem is thinking about AI adoption more broadly in connection to this announcement?
Totally, yeah. Our team's bouncing around a lot of ideas, and we've started testing a number of them. Generally speaking, we have our AI detector, which is already navigating voicemails, dial trees, and things like that on the caller's behalf. And so I envision a world where that detector is now also monitoring for a screener, dropping that opener for you, and then waiting and only connecting you if the person enters or like allows you into the call. And then you connect, you'll be in a conversation. And it'll be a better conversation because you've already kind of given some early context. In addition, we like to use these our smart list workflows and between the smart list and the wealth of data we have on having maybe called these prospects before, we can actually flag, okay, here are the people that use call screening, call them separately in a focus block. Because you can imagine like your opener, your pitch is going to be a little bit different for someone who has that 2 sentences of context versus someone who is answering cold and just sort of not sure who you are. And so you may want to put those people to the side and call them as a block where you're like, okay, I'm in call screener mode. Like, let's go. Beyond that, I think that's sort of the straightforward and obvious way that we could sort of make this pretty seamless from the jump. But I think beyond that, I'm actually really excited about what this could turn into if adoption ends up being really, really high. Like counterintuitively, I really just imagine that this enhances the cold call experience. Like you're getting, as I said before, you're getting to pitch your opener to folks who haven't even answered the phone yet. I think the best teams will absolutely master this, and it will increase the number of good conversations they're having. And as Jeremy said, like our data science folks are like absolutely thrilled to have this like wealth of data to be able to like better test openers and reactions and things like that. Like, we've got millions and millions of calls, like over a million a day. And that's just going to lead to like great outcomes for our teams in the way that, I mentioned before, like your MailChimps and companies like that have been doing forever for marketers, right? Like you're using very scientific methods to get the absolute most out of your marketing effort. I imagine that could happen here as we sort of get better and better data on what's working for our cold callers.
I love it. I want to thank you guys both and everybody for joining for your time. We will send you the recorded version of this so you can share it with your teams. As Bob mentioned at the very beginning, like this comes out in September, and given the interest in this webinar, I imagine we could probably do another one of these closer to September. We always say here, opportunity is calling. That's not going to change. This is an opportunity to really sharpen your pitch and connect with more people on cold calls. So thank you, everyone. I know there's a ton of questions we weren't able to get to. We will do follow-up content on that as well. So thank you, everybody, again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. And bye, everybody.